Hey guys, welcome to Mild Moments History. Tonight, you're not in your bed. You're in the alleys of Victorian London. The rain stopped hours ago, but the ground still glistens, and something cold just soaked through your boot. You think the 1800s were all corsets and carriages? Not for the people who worked when the rest of the city slept. You carry a lantern in one hand, a tin pail in the other. There's no uniform, no badge, just the smell and the silence. By the end of this night, you'll know why this job existed in every city, yet no one ever spoke its name. What time is it where you are? I'd love to know who's listening in the dark with us. And if you like these slow, strange walks into the past, maybe hit subscribe. It means more than you know. Now, dim the lights. Let your breath slow. And if there's a little white noise in the background, that's perfect. Because tonight, you're not falling asleep. You're walking into a city that forgot who cleaned up after it. You wake up before the city does. The air smells of wet stone and wood rot. It's cold, not sharp, like winter, but damp thick like something's clinging to your lungs. Your room is a crawl space under the eaves of a tenement. The ceiling dips so low, you have to hunch just to sit. There's mold on the walls, but you've named it. It's been there longer than you have. Beside your bed, really, just a sack stuffed with straw and newspaper, sits a cracked mug of water you wouldn't trust your dog with. You don't have a dog, you barely have socks. When you stand, the floor creaks, not because it's old, but because it's swollen. Rain seeps in from somewhere. You gave up trying to stop it. Outside your window, more a hole with a broken shutter. You hear hooves, early carts. One of them heavy with coal, another clinking with milk bottles. They get to work at dawn. You start long before that. There's no breakfast waiting for you. Just a heel of bread left out overnight, gone soft and sour. You sniff it, then eat it anyway. You've learned not to eat much before the shift. It sits wrong in your gut, especially when the bucket sloshes. You keep salt in your pocket. Not to flavor food you haven't seen meat in a week, but to rub under your nose. It dulls the other smells, not all the way, but enough to keep from gagging. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a neighbor gives you a bite of potato or cabbage boiled until it loses all will to live. You chew slowly, not because it tastes good, but because you don't know when the next thing comes. There's no tea, no coffee, just water from the public pump that sometimes tastes like rust, or worse. You pretend it's clean. Pretending helps. You don't pray. Not anymore. But sometimes, when the streets are quiet and your hands are shaking from the cold, you whisper old things. Half a hymn. A name you forgot the face for. You're not sure it counts, but it helps you keep walking. Some say your job's cursed, that it poisons the soul. Others say it's just work dirty but honest. You don't believe either. You believe in keeping your head down, in not making noise, in finishing the route before the sun rises high enough to cast shadows. You've heard people talk about God punishing cities like this with cholera. You don't know what cholera is, but you've seen what it does. You've carried the buckets through those alleys, and you know it's not just punishment. It's what happens when the world forgets how many people live beneath it. There are inspectors now, and men in suits who talk about sewers and reform, but none of them walk where you walk. None of them carry what you carry. The fog tonight is thick as paste. You can't see past your arm. But you know the streets by feel. The dip in the cobblestones, near the tannery. The soft ground behind the bakers where the rats scatter in twos and threes. You've heard rumors, new pipes, new systems, maybe even an end to the buckets. The talk makes you uneasy. You should be relieved, but you're not. Because the job may be awful, but it's yours, and you know how to do it. You know the routes, the rhythms, the places where people pretend they don't see you. If the city changes, will it remember you were ever part of it? Tonight feels strange. The air is quieter than usual. The street lamps hiss, but don't flicker. A cat watches you from a rooftop, its eyes pale in the dark. And when you lift your first bucket heavier than usual, warm and sour against your leg, you feel it in your bones. Something is shifting beneath London, and you're walking straight into it. Not with training, not with welcome, just with a bucket. A man who knows the silence, and a city that never looks back. You don't speak as you walk toward the river. The streets behind you are darker now, not because the fog has thickened, but because the silence has. It creeps into the seams of your coat, slips down your collar, settles beneath your ribs. You carry it like a second pail. Thomas walks ahead, the lantern casting a circle of weak gold around his boots. His coat hangs heavy from dampness. Not from rain, just the weight of the night itself. He never turns around to see if you're still behind him. He doesn't need to. You're there. You have no choice but to be. The closer you get to the water, the colder the air becomes. It changes the way the city smells. Less human waste, more salt and rust. You don't know if that's better, just different. You step carefully on the wooden dock. The planks groan under your weight, but Thomas moves like a shadow. He knows which boards bend, which ones splinter. You step where he steps, half a beat behind. The barge is already waiting, long, low, mute. It's tied to the post with a rope that looks too thin for the job, but somehow holds. The barrels on deck are open-mouthed and patient. Thomas sets his bucket down with care. Then he climbs onto the barge, with a quiet familiarity that almost looks like grace. He doesn't rush, doesn't hesitate, just moves like the barge belongs to him. You hesitate for a second, then follow. The wood shifts beneath you. The fog curls tighter around your shoulders. Thomas opens a barrel and pours. No splash, no sound beyond the thick suck of waste meeting waste. He finishes, steps aside, gestures for you to do the same. You kneel, pour slowly. You try not to breathe, but the smell finds you anyway. Not fresh, not old, just endless. Like the river doesn't ever forget what's been fed to it. Thomas says nothing, but you feel him watching, not judging, just making sure you learn the rhythm. Lift, tip, breathe, move on. When the buckets are empty, you both sit on the edge of the barge, legs hanging, fog pressing in like a damp blanket. The city behind you disappears. He pulls something from his pocket, a hard crust of bread, maybe 2 days old. He breaks it in half and hands you a piece. You accept it without a word. Chew slowly. Let it soften on your tongue. The river slaps gently against the hull. A seagull cries in the distance, then nothing again. Thomas looks out toward the water, not really seeing it, more like remembering something inside it. They used to dump everything here, he says. Voice low, unhurried. Dead animals, rotten food, sometimes worse. You don't ask what worse means. He goes on, back when the cholera came, people blamed the air, said the smell was killing us. He pauses. But it wasn't the smell. It was what we were pouring, what we couldn't see once it sank. You glance at the water. It's still, oily, reflects nothing. You wonder how many secrets it holds. They never thanked us, he says. Never will. But when we stop, they'll notice. You sit in silence. The wind picks up slightly. Not strong, just enough to move the fog sideways. I had a partner once, he says suddenly. Years ago. Name was Eli. Tall boy. Smiled too much. A faint trace of a grin pulls at his face. Said he didn't mind the smell. Said it made him feel useful. You wait. He slipped one night. Barrels were full. Dock was wet. Another pause. Long. He chews the rest of his bread and doesn't look at you. You don't ask what happened. You already know. Thomas stands, slowly, picks up his bucket again. The motion is deliberate, steady. He looks at you not with sadness, with the kind of quiet that says, this is what the work is. Not punishment, not duty, just presence. You follow him off the barge. The dock creaks behind you. The fog swallows your footsteps. You don't speak, neither does he. But for the first time since the night began, your pace matches his exactly. You turn off the main path into an alley narrower than your shoulders. The fog doesn't reach here. It's too dense with brick and mildew. You hold your bucket close and duck under the sagging clothesline. A sock brushes your cheek. Still damp. Probably always damp. Thomas doesn't say a word. He just moves ahead, lantern swinging low, barely lighting the steps in front of him. He stops at the end of the alley and raises his hand, not to speak, but to listen. You hear it too. A quiet drip, then another, then silence. There's no door on the house in front of you, just a hole in the wall covered in wet burlap. The fabric sags from its own weight. Someone scratched a cross into the brick beside it. Faded. Old. You wonder if it's a warning or a prayer. This one's different, Thomas says softly. You wait for more, but that's all he gives. He pushes the burlap aside with his boot. The space behind it smells like mold and soap and something more sour. You can't see inside. You don't want to. but you follow him anyway. The room is low and close walls dripping from the inside. A woman is sitting in the corner. She doesn't look up. Her eyes are open, but she's somewhere else. You feel it like a chill down your neck. Thomas nods once toward her, then moves to the other side of the room. A wooden box is half buried in ash near the hearth. That's the privy. Indoors, illegal. Hidden. But sometimes, it's the only option when the streets outside feel more dangerous than the rot inside. He lifts the lid with both hands. His face doesn't change. Yours does. You try to hide it. You hold your pail steady as he pours slow and clean. The contents slosh like wet secrets. Then it's your turn. You crouch beside him and do the same. The smell sticks behind your teeth. The woman hums very faint. A tune that loops without melody. You don't know if she notices you. Thomas doesn't rush, but he doesn't linger either. When the pails are empty, he sets them down gently, then leaves a folded piece of cloth beside her. It looks like bread wrapped in wax paper. She used to work in the laundry, he says, as you step back into the alley, before the sickness. You don't ask what kind. He doesn't tell you. You breathe again once you're back in the air. It's not fresh, but it's outside. It helps. Thomas hands you a scrap of rag soaked in vinegar. Rub your hands, he says. You do. The burn distracts you from everything else. She's alone, you ask. He nods. Has been since the others were taken. You wait. Inspector won't come near her. No one does, except us. You look back towards the cloth curtain. It doesn't move. She always leaves the lid on tight, he adds. As if that says something kind about her. Maybe it does. You walk again. The buckets swing gently at your sides. Not empty, not full. The city feels quieter than before, as if it too is waiting for someone to speak. Most think we just carry filth, Thomas says after a long while. But sometimes, we carry what's left of someone's dignity. The sentence hangs between you softer than fog. You reach the next street. The houses here are taller brick, stacked on brick, like teeth in a clenched jaw. Windows closed, shutters drawn. But you know behind each wall, someone is waiting for you to come and take away what they pretend never existed. Thomas walks a bit slower now. Maybe for your sake, maybe not. But when he lifts the next lid, he nods toward you. Your turn. You take the bucket. You lift the lid. You pour. And for the first time, you don't flinch. You're walking through the lower yards now. Streets where the brick has gone soft with age, and the gutters hold more memory than rain. The fog doesn't settle here. It seeps. Into wood, into shoes, into skin. Thomas slows his pace. Not from fatigue. You're beginning to see that he doesn't tire the way others do, but because of something else. His head tilts slightly, like he's listening. You try to match his quiet. Then you hear it. Not loud, not alarming, just the soft scratch of tiny claws. There, he says, pointing with a nod toward a stack of crates. Listen. You do. A rustle, a squeak, then another. It's not unusual, but Thomas is watching too closely for it to be normal. They come first, he says. Always. You frown. First before what? He doesn't answer. Just keeps walking, bucket swinging gently, eyes scanning corners. You follow, glancing down the alley as a rat darts across your path. Bold as a banker. They know before we do, he murmurs. The next house is quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where a sound used to live and has now moved on. You knock lightly, out of habit. No answer. You bend to retrieve the waste pail left at the back door. It's lighter than usual. The lid sealed tight. A bad sign. Thomas watches as you lift it, sniff slightly without meaning to, and realize something's off. It doesn't smell like waste. It smells like sickness. He nods. Leave it. You hesitate. The city pays you to take what no one wants. But sometimes, what's inside is more than just filth. Sometimes, it's a warning wrapped in tin. Thomas pulls a small stick of chalk from his coat and draws a faint X near the doorframe. Not an official mark, just his own. I come back in 2 nights, he says. If no one answers, I tell the men with the cart. You don't ask what that means. But you know, you've heard them. The wheels that roll long after curfew. The wooden cart that creaks even when it's empty. The men with gloves who don't look up. You walk in silence for a while. The streets are narrowing, Han, closing in like ribs around a lung. The fog thickens low to the ground now, And every so often, a rat darts out from behind a box, unhurried, unafraid. They're bold tonight. Thomas stops by a drain and taps the edge with his boot. The grate rattles slightly. From below, a squeal, then a splash. This is where they come up first. He says, if the sewers flood, if the pipes back up, if the disease finds a new home, you crouch beside him, peer into the grate. Nothing but darkness. And the smell, acrid, like wet metal and something trying to rot but never given the chance to finish. They feel the change before we do, he adds. They run when the water turns bad. Before the doctors, before the officials, before the screams. You look at him, his face is unreadable. Have you ever? You start, but he cuts you off gently. Yes, he says, too many times. He starts walking again. You follow, glancing behind at the grate. Something moves. You don't stay to see what. At the next stop, the lid is loose. Not carelessly so, just trembling, as if something inside had tried to lift it first. You open it cautiously. Inside is the usual mix of waste, straw, wet paper. But layered beneath is something else. A handful of fur, thin, scattered, like the end of a struggle no one wanted to admit happened. Thomas doesn't comment, just holds his pail steady while you pour. You don't ask how long he's known this route was changing. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries, not loud, but tired. Then nothing. I've only been bit once, he says suddenly. As you walk on, right here. He lifts a gloved hand, taps the back of it. Didn't bleed much, but it stayed swollen for days. What did you do? He shrugs, wrapped it, kept working. Can't stop just because the city doesn't like you. You reach the edge of the row and pause. The light is softer here. Lanterns glow behind curtains, the better houses. The ones where men wear gloves and women speak French they never learned properly. Thomas doesn't look at them. He sets his bucket down beside a stone step and waits. You do the same. The quiet stretches. Then, as if remembering something long buried, he speaks again. The first time I saw a rat crawl over a dying man, I thought it was death itself. But it wasn't. Just hunger. We're all just trying to stay full. You don't know what to say, so you don't say anything. And in the pause that follows, you realize this job isn't about waste. It's about knowing what comes next, even if no one listens. You've been walking long enough that the weight on your arms feels normal now. Not light, just expected, like it's grown into you. Thomas hasn't spoken for a while, but that's not unusual. The silence between you feels practiced, familiar, like fog filling the space between rooftops. You reach a small row of houses near the edge of Clerkenwell. Narrow, crooked, the kind of place people forget when they talk about the city. You know the next stop. Thomas slows, and so do you. There's a window on the second floor, cracked open just enough to let the smoke out. You glance up, and that's when you see her. She's maybe 15, maybe 16. Bare shoulders, tired eyes. Her hair is tied with a strip of cloth that's seen too many winters. But what you notice first is the flame a small candle cupped in her hands. She doesn't hide. She doesn't flinch. She just watches. Thomas doesn't look up. He never does. But you do. You wonder, have you ever been watched like this before? Not judged? Just seen. The girl leans forward slightly, and the light catches in her eyes. She raises the candle higher. Just a little. Not as a threat. Not even as a greeting. More like a question. What are you doing? Why are you carrying that? Do you ever stop? You blink, and the candle trembles. And maybe, just maybe, you hold her gaze longer than you should. Thomas clears his throat. You lower your eyes. The pail shifts in your grip. She does that sometimes, he murmurs. Holds the light out like she's blessing us. You glance at him. Her father's sick. He adds, bedridden. The privy's inside. You nod. You already guessed. You follow him through the side gate. The smell meets you before the door does stale. Thick, clinging to the walls. The back room is dark. A curtain has been nailed across a broken window. Inside, there's no sound but breathing. Labored, rhythmic, human. Thomas moves with quiet purpose. He kneels by the indoor box, lifts the lid. You help. No words. Just wait. Just motion. When it's done, he wipes the handle gently with a cloth, leaves it folded on the edge like an apology. You both step out again, back into the chill. The sky has begun to pale just slightly. That ghost of blue that comes before dawn even knows it's arriving. And she's still there, at the window, still holding the candle, still watching. Thomas doesn't look up. But this time, you do. And this time, you raise a hand. Small, quick, nothing dramatic. Just enough to say I see you. 2. She doesn't wave back, but she doesn't look away either. And in that pause between two people who have nothing to give each other but recognition, something passes. Something older than the city. Something softer than shame. Something that says, you're still human. Thomas starts walking again. You follow. After a while, he says, I don't mind her watching. You don't answer. But he knows. You walk for a long stretch without words. The buckets swing. The fog rises behind you, like a curtain closing on a stage. No one applauded. Then you speak, softly. Do you think she'll remember us? Thomas shrugs. Maybe not your face. Maybe not your name. But she'll remember the smell. The buckets. The men who came when everyone else stayed away. He doesn't say it with bitterness. Just truth. And you walk on. Hey, are you still with us? Still listening? If so, maybe there's a light in your window, too. Maybe not a candle. Maybe just your screen. Or the soft hum of your fan. But if you're still here, thank you. It means something. Because even when no one else sees you, you're a part of the story now. And there's still more to tell. The street ahead glistens like glass. Cobblestones soaked through. Gutters murmuring. Puddles wide enough to swallow a shoe. The rain passed hours ago, but the city still drips. It doesn't steam. It clings. You step carefully around the edge of a broken pipe, feeling the weight of your bucket pull against your wrist. Your coat is damp again, not from the air, but from walls that weep long after the storm. Thomas walks with his usual certainty. You wonder how many storms he's walked through, how many mornings like this where the sky pretended to help. They think rain cleans the city. He mutters without turning his head. But all it does is stir the rot. You look around. He's right. The gutters bubble, sluggish. The drains belch with every step. What should have washed away now floats in little islands, scraps of cloth, bones of rats, soot too soaked to burn. You reach a familiar back gate, where ivy droops over a rusted hinge. Thomas pushes it open with his boot. The hinges creak like old lungs. There's a privy here, low and wide like a storage chest. The lid is warped from weather. He lifts it slowly, and the smell is different this time. Not sharper, not fresher, just older, like something that's been buried too long and forgotten how to breathe. You kneel beside him. The earth under your knees is soft, and you feel it begin to soak through. The contents slosh slower today. Rain has diluted the waste, but not removed it. It's heavier in a different way, less dense, more resentful, as if the water only made it angrier. Thomas empties his bucket with steady care. No words, just that same slow rhythm. You follow suit, but your grip slips slightly. The handle jerks. A splash hits your boot. Not much, but enough. Thomas doesn't scold. He just glances down, then back at your face. No shame in being human, he says. Just clean it soon. You nod, and the words settle somewhere inside you. You both move on. The street ahead has turned a mirror. You catch your own reflection in a puddle warped, colorless. Thomas passes through it without pause, breaking it with the toe of his boot. After the flood of 444, he says, they thought they'd never need men like us again. You glance at him. He's looking straight ahead. They said the water would sweep it all out, waste, filth, rats, disease. But it didn't. It just moved it somewhere else. You reach the next house, a stone terrace with a painted door. There's no bucket waiting. Thomas raises his hand, waits. Then he walks around the side. You follow. Behind the house, there's a cellar door, slightly ajar. He lifts it with both hands. The hinges groan. You peer inside. Stairs lead down into black water. At the bottom, floating, half submerged, is the family's privy box. Upturned, split. Everything inside it spilled and swirling. Thomas doesn't move. He stands at the top, silent, eyes scanning what's left. Then he speaks, voice even lower than usual. This is what they mean when they say cleaned out. You don't reply. He closes the door gently, reaches into his coat and pulls out a stub of white chalk, draws a small mark on the stone. You recognize it now. It's not a message to you. It's a warning to himself. You keep walking. The rain begins again. Just a mist. But it finds the open seams in your collar, slides down the back of your neck. Let it rain all night, Thomas says. Let it flood the squares, drown the parks. Still won't wash out the lies. You glance at him. He doesn't look bitter, just tired. And you wonder how long it takes for a man to learn the difference between being wet and being soaked through. As you pass another drain, you pause. Something pale rests inside. A doll's arm, maybe, or a bone. You look closer. It's neither. It's soap. A perfect square of it. Ivory white, floating in the filth. Clean, untouched. Thomas sees it too. Funny thing, he says, people keep making soap, as if that's what keeps the plague away. You smile just a little, and the city around you keeps dripping, still listening. If you're here, that means the rain didn't scare you off. Not yet. And maybe, just maybe, you know something most don't, that not everything can be washed clean. Not by water, not by time, not by pretending it never happened. But you're still here, still walking with us. And we're not done yet. You turn down a side path Thomas never marks on the map. Narrow, crooked, tucked between a butcher's wall and a shuttered bookshop that hasn't seen ink in years. This way, he says, voice soft, almost apologetic. You follow. You always do. Here, the ground changes. Cobblestones give way to dirt, and dirt gives way to something worse, layers of ash and damp paper. The kind of ground that squishes, but never dries. The kind that holds stories no one asked to be told. The air thickens again, not with fog this time, but with stillness. There's no wind here, no rustle, just breath. And then you see him, a boy, not quite 7, not quite clean, not quite afraid. He sits on an overturned barrel, arms folded around his knees, shirt too big, eyes too sharp. He doesn't move when you enter the alley, doesn't flinch when the lantern glow catches the edges of his face. He just watches, head tilted slightly, not curious, not hostile, just watching. You freeze. Thomas doesn't. He walks past the boy, as if he's air, as if he's just another fog that London coughed into form. You hesitate. The boy's gaze finds you, steady, heavy, and for a moment, you forget what you're carrying. Forget where you're going. Then he blinks, once. You nod, barely. He nods back, and nothing is said. Thomas leads you to a crumbling door at the far end. Behind it, the house is leaning. Not metaphorically, it's physically leaning into the alley, like it's tired of standing straight. You squeeze through the gap behind him, careful not to brush against the hanging laundry that's never been clean. Inside, the privy is built from cratewood and prayer. You empty it, slowly, carefully. Your arms ache, wash, but not from the weight. From the boy's silence still clinging to your back. Thomas wipes the rim of the bucket, places the lid back with a soft tap, then turns to you. He's there most mornings, he says, finally acknowledging it. Never speaks, never asks, never leaves before we do. You nod. Where's his family, you ask, even though the answer is obvious. Thomas shrugs. Gone, probably, or still inside. Still inside. You don't ask if he means the house, or the ground beneath it. You step back outside. The boy hasn't moved. Still sitting on the barrel, still wrapped in too much fabric and not enough time. This time, you meet his eyes properly. Not to challenge, not to question, just to be seen. And he sees you, the bucket in your hand, the stain on your sleeve, the weariness in your shoulders. And for a second, you think he knows more about this job than you do. Not the waist, not the roots, but what it does to the face, what it leaves in the spine. You take a slow step forward. He doesn't move. You reach into your coat and pull out a piece of bread from your pocket, dry, cracked, still warm from your palm. You offer it without words. He doesn't reach for it, but he watches as you place it beside the barrel. Then you leave it there, and follow Thomas back into the mist. Thomas says nothing as you walk. Neither do you. But the air feels different now, like something was acknowledged, not healed, not forgiven, just seen. You'll see him again, Thomas says quietly. After 2 streets. You nod. Should we do something? We already did, he replies. We didn't look away. And somehow, that feels heavier than the bucket in your hand. You still with us? Still listening? If so, thank you. Because sometimes, what people need most isn't help. It's to not be forgotten. To be looked at. Not like a problem, but like a person. And if this boy ever finds his way to a warm room, maybe he'll remember the night someone didn't walk past. Maybe he'll remember you. The street is quiet here. Too neat. Too swept. You smell it first, coal smoke, damp brick, lavender from someone's laundry. It doesn't belong to your world. Not really. But you've walked far enough tonight that even this feels like part of the same dream. Thomas slows. Careful now, he says. You nod. The next house isn't on the list. No marker. No chalk. No open gate or waiting pail. But Thomas leads you around the side, past a small hedge, past a stone step too polished for the part of town you usually walk through. You hesitate. We're not meant to. He raises a hand. Not to hush you, just to remind you that here, words aren't safe. You step into the garden, yes, a garden. Real flowers? Overgrown, yes, but blooming. A stone path curves like a memory toward a back door. He knocks once, not loud, just enough. No one answers. Then the door creaks open, not from hinges, but from hands. A woman in her 50s stands there, barefoot, hair pinned, eyes clear. She doesn't speak. Thomas doesn't either. She nods once and steps aside. You both enter. The house smells warm. Real wood, oil lamp, spice. Your body tightens automatically, too clean, too quiet, too visible. You feel the bucket in your hand like a confession. She leads you down a narrow hall to a door that should lead to storage. But when she opens it, you see something else. A private privy, wooden, built into the floor, lined with cloth and ash, tidy, sealed, well-maintained. This isn't regulation. It isn't registered. It isn't on any inspector's ledger. But it's here, real. You glance at Thomas. He doesn't react. He steps forward, kneels, lifts the lid. You hand him the tools wordlessly. He works carefully, without rush. You help. No sound, only motion. There's dignity here, somehow, as if the work, in this space, isn't shame but service. The woman waits in this doorway, hands clasped. She watches without watching, like she's looking through you not to judge, but to remember. When it's done, Thomas wipes the rim, replaces the lid. You clean the handle, fold the rag, and leave it neatly on the shelf where you found it. The woman steps forward, gently offers a wrapped paper parcel to Thomas. He doesn't take it. She looks at you. You accept it. Bread, still warm. You nod once. She nods back. And just like that, it's over. You walk out the way you came, through the garden, under the sky that doesn't know how to shine tonight. Once you're back on the road, you speak. That wasn't legal, you say. No, Thomas replies. And we still did it. Yes. You glance at him. He doesn't look ashamed. You look down at the parcel in your hand. She just wanted to be clean, you whisper. She wanted to be unseen, he corrects. But in her own way. You walk in silence for a block. The bread smells of rosemary. She could be fined, you murmur. Thomas shrugs. If anyone comes asking, will they? No, you nod. Not because you agree, but because you understand now. There are kinds of survival that don't fit into rules, and kinds of privacy that require a quiet arrangement. Still there, still walking. Then you already understand this better than most. Some stories aren't written in ledgers. They're passed from hand to hand, wrapped in bread, folded into cloth, left in the dark to stay safe. You didn't knock on that door to be thanked. You knocked to be trusted. And maybe that's the same thing. You used to think streets were just stone, just somewhere to step, somewhere to get from door to door. But not tonight. Not after this long. Not with your arms sore and your ears so used to silence that even the wind feels like a voice. It begins after you pass the Weaver's Alley, where the gutters curl instead of run straight, and the buildings lean like tired drunks into each other. You hear it first, in the way your boots echo. Soft. Then softer. Then, not yours. You stop. Thomas doesn't. The sound stops too. You look back. No one there. But the feeling doesn't go. You catch up with Thomas. He doesn't ask why you paused. Maybe he knows already. The streets remember things, he says, without looking. Even after the people forget. You want to ask what he means, but the words never come out. You walk on. Ahead, the street narrows into a stone corridor too tall for comfort, too quiet for a city this size. The walls seem to breathe. Damp patches crawl like ghosts across the brick. Then you hear it again. Not a voice exactly, not a word. Just a shape, a feeling. Like the street is whispering, not out loud, but inside you. You glance at Thomas. His face doesn't change. But you can see it in the way he steps slower, flatter, heels landing first. Listening. I used to ignore it, he murmurs. Told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Then I stopped ignoring it. That helped. You listen too. Not with your ears, with your ribs, your feet, your fingers gripping the bucket handle. The whisper is there, faint, but growing. It's not saying words. It's saying something's wrong. You round the corner, and that's when you see it. A pile of rags beside the drain. At first, you think it's laundry, or cloth someone dropped. But Thomas stops cold. And that's when you know. It's not cloth. It's someone, a man, curled, still. You can't tell if he's breathing. Thomas kneels, not in panic, just with the weight of someone who's done this before. He places 2 fingers on the man's wrist. Waits, then shakes his head. Not alive. Not recent either. The body is soaked, but not from rain. From the city itself, sewn into him, through him. You kneel beside Thomas. What do we do, you whisper? We mark the door, he replies. Same as always. There's no door. He nods. Then we mark the wall. He reaches for his chalk. You look again at the man's face. Young, maybe. Hard to tell. Could be older than you. Could be 15. Time doesn't show the same way down here. His hand is open, empty. But near his fingertips, there's a scrap of paper, half buried in gutter water. You reach for it before you know why. The ink is blurred, but you make out a word. Forgive. You don't know who he meant it for. Thomas sees it, Shunu, says nothing. He finishes marking the wall an X, with a curl through the bottom, a sign only those like you would ever notice. A signal for the cart. You both step away, and as you leave the alley, the whispering fades. Not because the street stopped speaking, because they said what they needed to say. You walk in silence for a long time. Then Thomas speaks. They come to us, sometimes, the ones who have nowhere left. You nod. And we can't carry them. You nod again. But we remember. Hey, still listening. Then you heard it too, didn't you? The street's voice. Soft. Low. Not made for everyone. Only for those who walk slow enough to listen. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to understand. You just need to keep walking. We're still with you. And the city still has more to say. The light changes slowly. Not sunrise. Not yet. Just a softness to the sky. A graying of black into something bruised and quiet. You look up and realize you can see your hands again. That's how you know the night's ending. Your boots are heavier now. Not from mud, though there's plenty of that, but from repetition. The same motion, again and again. You've stopped feeling the handle against your fingers. It's become part of you. Thomas walks a few steps ahead. Same pace, same silence. Neither of you says it, but you know the route is almost done. The city begins to stretch, slowly. One window creaks open. A candle flickers out. A chimney coughs a thin line of smoke. The world you worked through the night to clean is now waking up. To forget you. You pass a bakery. The shutters are still down, but the scent has already escaped warm yeast, burnt edge, something faintly sweet. Your stomach stirs, and Thomas glances back. You eat yet? You shake your head. He stops, reaches into his coat, tosses you half a heel of bread, cold, dry, wrapped in a strip of paper that once held a list. You nod in thanks. You chew slowly. It helps. You reach the final gate just as the first real light hits the cobblestones. It doesn't glow. It glints sharp and tired. London light. There's a last pail by the wall, covered neatly, left with precision. Someone cared. Thomas lifts the lid, pauses, then smiles, just barely. They scrubbed it, he says. Bless them. You pour together, quietly. The waste flows like time used up, forgotten, already gone before you realize it was ever full. When you're done, you stand side by side. Both of you watch the drain for a moment, as if waiting for it to say something back. It doesn't. You turn to leave. That's when you hear it. A door creaks open behind you. A man steps out, wearing a waistcoat, slippers, face freshly shaved. He sees you, sees the pails, sees the stains. You nod. He doesn't. He lights his pipe, looks past you, then turns and walks the other way. No word, no nod, no thank you. Thomas doesn't flinch. He just lifts the bucket, shrugs slightly, and walks on. You watch the man disappear down the lane. Do they ever say anything you ask? Thomas chuckles. Only when we miss a night. You walk a few more steps. Would it matter if they did? He thinks for a moment. Then maybe. But it's not why we do it. You're not sure if that comforts you or not. The wind shifts slightly. You smell the coal fires, warming behind doors, the wash water being heated, the soft hum of the city trying to remember how to be proud again. But not of you. Never of you. You pass two boys walking toward the pump with a tin bucket between them. They look at you. One whispers to the other. They giggle. You keep walking. You round the final corner. There, tucked between a wall and an old well, is the storage shed. The place where you drop your buckets, where your night ends. Thomas unlatches the door, swings it open. Inside, the shelves are neat. Clean buckets stacked like bones. A cloth hangs on a hook, a bottle of vinegar on the floor. He sets his bucket down. You do the same. Then you both sit, backs against the wall, legs stretched out, breathing. For the first time in hours, you listen to your own lungs. Then, Thomas speaks. Tomorrow's route will be worse. You nod. But tonight's done, he adds. And somehow, that's enough. You okay? Still with me? Then let me tell you something soft. Before you drift, most nights, no one says thank you. No one waits at the door. No one remembers the ones who walk with buckets while the rest sleep. But that doesn't mean it didn't matter, because someone had to carry what others turned away from. And tonight, that someone was you. You didn't flinch. You didn't run. You stayed. You poured. You walked beside Thomas. And even if the city never thanks you, you'll remember the silence. The real kind, the good kind. The kind that means it's done. The sun is up now, but barely. Not bright. Just enough to make shadows sharper. Regrets clearer. The kind of morning that pretends it's clean, but still carries the stink of the night underneath. Thomas takes a different route today. Narrower streets, brick tighter together. The sort of alley that even light thinks twice about entering. You follow. At first, you think it's just another house. Same sagging gutter, same faded shutters. But Thomas slows. There's a man waiting near the side gate. Hat too polished, shoes too dry, hands tucked neatly behind his back like he's afraid of brushing against anything alive. He turns when he sees you both. The inspector. You know the type. You've seen them in pamphlets, at town meetings, or from behind the crowd. He smiles, not unkind, just efficient. Ah, he says, right on time. Thomas says nothing. The inspector glances at your boots, your hands, your buckets, then quickly looks away. You're not offended, but you notice. Just doing a quick spot check, the man says. Regulations. You understand. Thomas doesn't answer. He sets his bucket down slowly, like placing a tired truth onto the ground. The inspector pulls a folded sheet from his coat pocket, unfolds it, smooths it, doesn't notice the wind pulling at the corner. You do. Privy location, he asks. Thomas nods toward the gate. Ventilation. Thomas shrugs. Sealed container. No reply. The inspector clears his throat, jots something down, then glances toward the gate just once. You wait for him to move, to check, to touch. He doesn't. Instead, he tucks the paper back into his coat and offers a small nod. Well then, he says, looks good enough. He pulls out a handkerchief, wipes his hands, even though they never got dirty. Then he leaves. You watch him go hat neat, coat pressed, shoes clicking like he's walking over stage boards, instead of the bones of a city that forgot to bury its waste. He didn't even look, you say? After a long moment. No, Thomas agrees. He's in charge of this. Yes. And he didn't look. Thomas picks up his bucket. Most don't. You stand still a second longer. Eyes on the alley the inspector disappeared into. Why does he bother coming? Thomas pauses. To make sure we're still doing it, he says. So he doesn't have to. Later, as you lift another lid in another yard that smells like wet iron and mildew, you wonder, how many men like him sign papers about things they've never touched? How many believe they know the city without walking it in silence, without holding what it throws away? You think about these inspectors' shoes, how polished they were. You glance at your own. Brown, cracked, wet. But they've walked in truth, and truth doesn't shine. Hey, you still listening? Then maybe you've met someone like him. Someone who makes rules but never wipes the mess. Someone who signs but never sees. If you have, take comfort in this. He may never look down. But you did. You looked, you lifted, you stayed. And that matters more than any signature. The city doesn't need more men in hats. It needs you. Some streets feel softer than others. Not in the stone. In the way people glance out from behind curtains, less like you're something to fear, more like you're something they forgot was still needed. You walk through one of those streets now. Your pail is lighter than it was. Your boots heavier. Your mind is quieter than it should be. Thomas walks beside you today, not ahead. It's a gentle slope here. You feel it in your knees more than your feet. The houses lean forward, just slightly, like they're trying to listen in. And that's when you hear it. Not a whisper, not a rat. A giggle. You stop. So does Thomas. There's a child at the corner of the fence. Hair like twine, cheeks like soot and sun. She watches you through a hole in the wood, face pressed close. Not hiding, not quite brave either. Just there, watching. Is that the bucket, she asks? Her voice is too soft to carry far, but somehow it finds you anyway. You don't answer at first. You're not used to being asked questions. Thomas gives the faintest nod. It is. The girl grins. It smells. You nod back. It does. She tilts her head. Where does it go? You pause. Before you can answer, Thomas says. To the river. The big one? Yes. She looks thoughtful. Does the river mind? That makes you smile, just barely. Thomas shrugs. The river has no mouth. She thinks about that for a while. Then she says something that breaks your step more than the smell ever did. My name's Elsie. Just like that. No reason, no request, no fear. Just a name given freely. You blink. The street feels suddenly bigger. You open your mouth to answer, then stop. You've forgotten how to say your own name out loud. She waits, so you give her part of it. Just the start. Jay. It's enough. She nods solemnly, like it's a secret now, like she'll keep it. Then her mother's voice calls from inside. Elsie. She flinches, then waves. Bye, Mr. River. And she's gone. The fence creaks shut. The moment stays. You and Thomas walk on. The next stop is behind a bakery. You lift. You pour. You wipe. You move. But something lingers. Not smell. Not weight. Something warmer. She gave you her name, Thomas says, as if stating a fact about the weather. She didn't have to. No. Why did she? He doesn't answer. So you offer one instead. Maybe she wanted us to know she saw us. Thomas nods. Maybe that's all people want, he says. To be seen by name, not just by task. You walk in silence for a while. Then Thomas adds, happened to me once? You look over. He's still walking, eyes forward. Little boy. Asked if I was a knight. You laugh, softly. I said no. He looked disappointed. What did you say next? I said I wear armor you can't see. You glance down at your coat, your gloves, the vinegar rag in your pocket. You understand now. Armor doesn't always shine. Still here. Then let me tell you something strange and small. Most nights, no one calls your name. Most days, they don't care if you have one. But tonight, someone did. A child, a fence, a candle's worth of kindness. And that's enough. You matter, not just because you carry the weight, but because someone, somewhere, might remember you by name. Even if it's just a letter, even if it's just a whisper, even if it's just you. It was past the usual hour. The lantern had burned low. Your boots were caked with 6 streets worth of forgetting. Thomas was about to call it. One more stop, one more quiet backyard, one more unspoken debt collected in the dark. And then it happened. A knock. You turned first. It was soft, hesitant. From behind the back gate of a row house, with ivy trying its best to climb where mortar had crumbled. Thomas looked up. The knock came again. Not a pounding, not a threat. Just a request. He stepped toward it. You followed. The gate creaked as he opened it. And there she was. An older woman, dress patched, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back in that half-wet way people wear when they've been trying to clean before company arrives. She held a small oil lamp in one hand and a basket in the other. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be out," she said. Thomas nodded. "We're always out." She gave a short breath of a laugh. "That's true, I suppose." You shifted slightly, unsure what to say, unsure why she knocked first. She looked at you. Not past you, at you. "I left the lid sealed. It's out back. But I thought you might like something warm. Before the sun comes." She lifted the basket. You caught the scent: stew, bread, and thyme. Thomas tilted his head. "That's not necessary." She shook hers gently. "I know. And that's why it mattered." You followed her, through the side path. A small candle burned in the window. You realized you'd never seen this house lit before. Not once, in all the routes, all the nights. It had always been dark, silent, sealed. But tonight, the door was open. The privy was tucked near the back wall, clean, covered, everything tied properly. Thomas emptied it quickly, methodically, like he always did. You helped. No rush, just quiet. Then you sat, on crates, in the garden, and she poured stew into tin bowls, handed one to each of you like it was a normal thing to do. No one had ever done this before. You tried to refuse at first. She insisted. "You carry everything," she said. "Let someone carry a little of you for once." You sat in silence, eating, listening to the garden breathe. And then, after a long quiet, she spoke again. "My father did what you do, years ago, before the city cared enough to name it." Thomas looked up. He used to come home smelling of vinegar and ash. Mother wouldn't let him sit on the furniture. She smiled. "But I sat with him, every night, on the floor." You nodded. Something warm moved in your chest. Not the stew. Recognition. She looked down at her hands. "They used to call him night trash, gutter ghost, things I won't repeat." "And you asked, what did you call him?" She looked up. "Dad." When you left, she wrapped 2 slices of bread in cloth and tucked them into your coat without asking. Thomas didn't stop her. Neither did you. Back on the street, the lantern felt lighter in your hand. You walked 2 more blocks before Thomas said anything. "Been doing this a long time," he murmured. You waited. "That's the first time someone knocked." You nodded. "Felt strange. But good." "Yes," you said. "Very good." "Hey." "Still walking with us." Then hear this. Most nights, you knock. You wait in silence. You collect what others won't speak of. But tonight, someone knocked first. Not to push you away, but to invite you in. And maybe that's rare. But maybe that's all it takes. One knock, one bowl, one reminder that you are not just a bucket in the dark. You are a person. Still listening. Then you already know. That kindness doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to arrive first. The fog had begun to return. Just a little. Not the heavy, swallowing kind. This was thinner, lighter. The kind that slips around the edges of things and makes shadows stretch where they shouldn't. You and Thomas walked down a lane neither of you liked. Not because it was dangerous, though it had its stories, but because it was too quiet. Even for this job. No dogs barked here. No windows creaked. The chimneys didn't smoke. Just stillness. There was a house near the end, stone-faced, low, with shutters always drawn, and vines that had long stopped pretending to bloom. The gate was open tonight. That was unusual. Thomas slowed. You followed. Behind the house, beside a lopsided fence, sat a bucket, covered, placed neatly. You stepped forward to lift it, your gloves damp, your fingers sore. And then you felt it. Heat. Not from the lantern, not from the sun. It hadn't been out in hours. The bucket was warm. Not steaming, not alarming, just unmistakably warm. You froze. Thomas noticed. What is it? You didn't answer right away. You just placed your hand flat on the wooden lid and said very softly, "They just used it." He stepped beside you, laid his own hand next to yours, waited, then nodded once. Could have been seconds ago. You scanned the house. No movement, no voice, no sound. But the warmth was proof. Someone had been here, very recently, and had done what everyone does, and left it for you to carry. The feeling hit you different this time. Not disgust, not fear. Just closeness. Usually, you arrive long after people have gone back to bed, after the mess has cooled, after shame and need have dried together into something almost anonymous. But not tonight. Tonight, they knew you were coming, and they used it anyway. Maybe that was trust. Maybe it was necessity. Maybe they wanted to see if you'd notice. You don't knock. You don't ask. You lift the lid gently. The smell confirms it. Fresh, recent, still swirling. You pour with extra care. No splash, no sound, no judgment. Then you wipe the rim, as always. Replace the lid. Step back. Thomas hasn't moved. He's still looking at the house. Then, very softly, he says, "There's someone behind that curtain." You look. He's right. Just a shift. A shadow. No face. But a presence. Watching. Not hiding. Not waving. Just there. You don't speak. Neither does Thomas. Instead, you nod toward the window, once, slow. The curtain doesn't move. But that's okay. The point wasn't to be seen. The point was to acknowledge, I know you're there. And you knew I was here. And that means something. Later, as you walk away, you speak. Do you think they were afraid? Thomas shakes his head. No, I think they just didn't want to pretend. You nod. You know what he means. This job lives in the spaces between pretending and remembering. And sometimes, the warm bucket tells you someone chose not to lie tonight. Hey, still with us, still walking in the fog. Then you felt it too, didn't you? That brief flicker when two lives nearly touched. Not with words, but with warmth. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't disrespect. It was the truth, handed to you, still warm from their hands. And if you felt it, then maybe you're ready to carry more than just the bucket. Maybe you're ready to carry what others leave behind without shame, without fear, without looking away. You still here? Then come on. There's still more to carry. And you're not alone. It's past the middle of the shift. The hour where time forgets what it's doing. Where the fog moves sideways. Where your legs feel more memory than muscle. You and Thomas move down a narrow lane that smells of iron and old ink. It used to be a printing alley. Someone said, now it just prints silence. The lantern casts thin shadows that stretch longer than they should. And then you hear it. A note. Not a noise. A note. Soft, thin, rising from somewhere beneath your feet. You stop. Thomas doesn't. He walks 2 more steps, then turns. You hear it. You nod. Where's it coming from? He lifts the lantern, holds it low. There's a grate near the wall, half covered in moss, half swallowed by the ground. The sound comes again. Clearer now. It's not a moan, not a pipe groan, not the whimper of a rat or the hiss of steam. It's almost a hum. High. Female. Not sad. Not joyful. Just there. Singing. From the drain. You both stare. Then Thomas kneels slowly. He doesn't speak into it. Just listens. You kneel too. Heart tight in your ribs. It continues. 4 notes. Then silence. Then again. Same melody. No change. No hesitation. You whisper. Is someone down there? Thomas doesn't answer right away. Then no. Not someone alive. You shiver. Not from cold. From the way the air presses against your back now. Like it's listening too. You move to lift the grate. Thomas stops you. Don't, he says. Let it be. You look at him. But what if? I heard that sound once before. He says. Years ago. Different street. Same hour. Same voice. And he straightens. It never lasts. Never repeats after that night. Never comes from the same drain. You glance down again. The melody repeats. Still no words. Still no source. Just the same soft call. Like something singing to the stone itself. You step back. Thomas looks up at the sky. Some say it's the city remembering, he murmurs. You frown. Remembering what? He shrugs. Who used to live here? Who used to love here? Who used to die here? The song fades. A pause. Then silence. Thick. Still. You wait. It doesn't return. Just the sound of your breath. The echo of boots on wet stone. Then a rat skitters across the path fast, frightened. Thomas exhales. It's gone. You nod. You walk. You don't speak for 3 more streets. And when you finally do, it's quiet. Did it scare you? Thomas smiles, barely. No, he says. It reminded me. Of what? He looks at you. That we're not the only ones awake. Later, as you pour from the final pail in that row, you glance at the nearest drain. Nothing comes from it. No hum, no song, no voice. But still, you find yourself listening and wondering. Maybe the city forgets what it buries. But not always. Maybe, once in a while, it sings back. Still here, still walking with us. Then let me tell you something few ever hear. The city hums when no one's watching. It hums for those who've gone, for those who stayed, and for those who carry the things no one else will. You heard it, didn't you? That strange little song. It wasn't for applause. It was a memory, wrapped in melody, rising like steam from a world no one writes about. So if you're still here, don't stop listening. You never know what the city might say next. You notice it as you reach for the first lid of the shift. Not pain, not stiffness. Just a small resistance, like your hand doesn't quite belong in the glove anymore. You pause, flex your fingers. The leather bites the crease of your thumb, tighter than usual. You wiggle it, thinking maybe the glove shrank in the cold. But the second one is the same. Snug, firm, familiar, but no longer soft. You don't say anything at first. Thomas lifts his own bucket, begins walking. You follow. Your boots splash in the puddle that doesn't reflect. The fog's too thick for mirrors tonight. The gloves tug again when you grip the pail. A part of you wonders, have they changed, or have you? It wasn't always like this. Your first night, the gloves felt enormous, like armor, like something borrowed from a man twice your size. They flapped at the fingertips, slid at the wrist, always too loose when you needed them firm. Back then, the job was heavier than the pail. Now the weight sits different. Now the gloves don't move unless your hands tell them to. And suddenly, the seams feel closer, as if your body has grown into the work, or the work has grown into you. Thomas notices, eventually. You all right? He asks, as you shake your hand again, mid-pour. You nod. Gloves tight. He squints. How long you had that pair? Since my first shift. He chuckles. They were loose back then. I remember. You don't say it aloud, but what you want to ask is this when it happens? When the job stops being something you wear and starts being something that wears you. Thomas doesn't answer your unspoken question, but he says, I've gone through 9 pairs. You blink. Really? He nods. Most of them didn't break. They just stopped feeling like mine. Too stiff, or too soft, or too clean. You look down at your hands. The leather is dark, but not black. Scuffed across the knuckles, creased like old paper. They're still good, you say? Yes, he says, but are they still you? You don't answer. Not yet. At the 4th stop, a nail snags the edge of the glove as you lift the lid. You feel it slice the surface. Just a thin tear, nothing dangerous, but it lingers. You glance at the cut, frown, tug the glove tighter. Thomas watches, doesn't speak. Halfway through the route, you sit together on a stone step to rest your backs. You pull the gloves off slowly, stretch your fingers, examine the lines in your palms. They've changed, calloused where they weren't, bruised in places that don't hurt anymore. You flip the glove inside out. It smells like vinegar and earth. Your scent is in it now. Deep, quiet, permanent. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like protection. It feels like skin. Thomas pulls something from his coat. A folded pair. Older, worn, but clean. He offers it to you. Spare, he says. From when my hands stopped fitting the job the old way. You hesitate. Then take them. Not because your gloves are broken, but because maybe you are growing. You finish the shift with the new old gloves. They creak differently. Hold firmer. Your fingers move more freely. And as you lift the last lid, you realize it's not just your hands that changed. It's your rhythm, your patience, Your way of stepping around shame instead of into it. The gloves didn't shrink. You expanded into the work, into yourself, into the kind of quiet only this city knows how to recognize. Still here, still walking. Then let me ask, when was the last time something small told you something true? A glove, a stitch, a seam that no longer fits. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're becoming. And tonight, you didn't just carry the bucket. You carried the proof that even in silence, you're still changing. So keep going. The road's not done yet. And neither are you. The fog that night was heavier than usual, thicker. It clung to your skin like wet cloth, muffled your steps, and made the world feel 2 feet closer than it should have been. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't need to. You were both listening. You turned onto a side street that felt forgotten. No lanterns here, just windows shuttered so tightly it was as if the houses didn't want to admit they were watching. You lifted the lantern higher. It didn't help. That's when you saw him, a man, standing still, not near a door, not beside a privy, not waiting with a bucket, just standing, in the center of the fog, arms at his sides, face half lit by your lantern. You stopped. Thomas did too. You couldn't see the man's feet. The mist swallowed them. He didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't speak, didn't blink. You whispered, "Is he lost?" Thomas didn't answer. Then he stepped forward. 1 step, then 2. The fog parted just enough to reveal more of the man's coat. Long, torn near the hem. The kind workers used to wear a decade ago, when the streets still belonged to coalmen and night sweepers. The man didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge you. You gripped your bucket tighter. "He's not real," you said softly, unsure who you were trying to convince. Thomas stopped 3 paces away. "Even ghosts need witnesses," he murmured. Your mouth felt dry. The man looked like he had been waiting for hours, or years. You took a step forward, then another. You could see his hands now bare, dirty, fingers still curled slightly as if he'd just set something down. A bucket, a life, a regret. You didn't know, but you felt it. He was one of you. Not now, maybe not even recently, but once. And whatever he was waiting for, he still hadn't gotten it. You whispered, "Should we ask?" Thomas shook his head. If he wanted to speak, he would have. The fog shifted again, and the man was gone. No footstep, no swirl, just gone. The space where he stood still held the shape of him, an outline in the mist, a memory with breath. You and Thomas stood silently. Then Thomas said, "He's not the first." You turned to him. "Do you see them often?" He shrugged. "Not often, but sometimes, when the city forgets too hard, someone waits too long." You stared into the empty fog. You could almost still see his eyes. Not sad, not angry, just still. You walked on, but slower, and you found yourself glancing over your shoulder more than once. Not out of fear, out of curiosity. What was he waiting for? A name, a thanks, a partner, a witness. You thought about what would happen if you stopped walking, stopped pouring, stopped moving. Would someone see you one day? Would you become fog too? Later, Thomas spoke. He had gloves like yours, he said. You looked down at your hands, then back at the road, and kept walking. Still here. Then maybe you saw him too. The one in the fog. The one who waited. No story, no request, just presence. That's what this job teaches you. Sometimes, the deepest pain isn't in what you carry, it's in what no one ever asked you to let go of. So if you're still walking, still holding the weight, still hearing our story, then know this. Someone sees you, even if they say nothing, even if they wait in silence, even if they're only mist. You are not walking alone. Not ever. It was the kind of cold that crept under your collar and made your bones feel hollow. Not wind, just a still, biting cold that had nothing to prove. You were 3 hours into the shift, your gloves stiff, the pail half full. Thomas had said little all night, but that wasn't unusual. Then you turned the corner onto Ashwell Street, a street like any other, quiet, gray. Houses that leaned slightly forward, like they were always about to apologize. And there it was, a window, open, just one, second floor, right above the back gate of number 46. It wasn't flung wide, just tipped inward, like someone had pushed it gently and never bothered to close it again. You felt it before you thought it. That shouldn't be open. Not in this part of the city. Not in this cold. Not with the stench that lived in alley gutters and inside your coat. But there it was. You stopped. Thomas kept walking for 2 steps, then followed your gaze. He smiled. You looked at him. She still keeps it open, he said. You blinked. You know who lives there. He nodded. Used to be her husband's window. He worked with me. You were quiet a moment. He was on the job for 12 years. What happened? Cholera. Quick. One day here, next day gone. You looked back at the window. She opens it every night. Thomas nodded. Since the day after his funeral? You frowned. Why? He shrugged. Says it's her way of saying she remembers. You didn't move. Didn't breathe for a second. You just looked at the window and wondered if the wind touching your cheek had passed through her hands. You and Thomas worked the yard as usual. The bucket was set properly. The lid wiped clean. There was no note, no coin, no gesture that said thank you. But when you turned to leave, you looked up. She was there, just a silhouette, just a figure framed in warm lamplight. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't speak. She simply stood behind the glass, watching, and not looking away. Thomas didn't turn. He didn't have to. He just said, softly, "That's for you." You swallowed. The night was colder than usual, but somehow your chest was warm. Later, you asked him, why does she keep it open, even in winter? He shrugged. She says the city shuts its doors on too many things. You nodded. She leaves hers open not for air, not for herself, for us. You looked back one last time. The light still burned. The curtain didn't move, but the space between you and her felt thinner, as if something invisible had reached out and touched your sleeve, just enough to say, I see you. Still here. Then maybe there's a window open somewhere near you, too. Maybe not upstairs. Maybe not on Ashwell Street. But in someone's memory. In someone's warmth. In someone's silent act of leaving something ajar for you to feel less alone. No applause. No reward. Just recognition. So if you're still walking with us tonight, look up. You might see one, too. A window that stayed open, just for you. You smell it before you see it. Not the usual. Not rot, not waste, not sour night air. Smoke, but not from a chimney. Not from wood, from ash, bitter, flat. The smell of something burned because someone needed it gone. Thomas stops walking. You stop too. He lifts his head slightly, nostrils flaring. Privy shouldn't smell like that. You both round the corner into the alley behind number 22. And there it is. A bucket, just like the others, but blackened at the rim. Steam curls from the cracks in the lid. Not heat, just memory of heat. You look at Thomas. He crouches, doesn't lift the lid. Not yet. He presses a gloved hand to the side of the container, then frowns. Still warm, he says, but not like before. You remember the warm bucket from earlier, the one freshly used. This isn't that. This is different. You kneel beside him. The ground is damp. Your boots sink slightly. Do we open it, you whisper. He nods. Slow. You lift, and inside not filth, not paper, not straw, but ash, dark gray, caked with soot, bits of blackened cloth, the corner of something that used to be parchment, now half flaked away. The smell rises, not like sewage, but like confession. What is this, you murmur? Thomas doesn't answer right away. He lifts a fragment with his fingers, turns it over. You see letters burned into it. Not a journal, not a newspaper. Not printed, handwritten, and gone now. Someone burned it all, Thomas says. Why? He looks up. To be forgotten. You help him scoop the contents slowly into the larger container. It's lighter than usual, but it feels heavier, like it carries the weight of a secret that no longer has a voice. You don't speak as you pour. Even the sound it makes soft, like dry leaves, feels wrong, like you're eavesdropping on something sacred. Afterward, Thomas doesn't close the lid immediately. He stares inside, then says, We've carried worse. You nod, but this is sadder. You whisper. He folds the burned scrap back into the bucket, closes the lid. Back on the street, the wind changes, carries a trail of smoke past your face. You wonder what it was. A letter, a name, a past someone finally gave up trying to keep. You think about all the things people try to flush out of their lives. Some they leave for you in silence, others they burn. But either way, it ends in your hands, and you carry it quietly. Like always, Later, Thomas says. Sometimes people set fire to their shame. You nod. Sometimes they just don't want to be found. He looks at you, eyes tired but calm. We carry both. Still here. Then maybe you've held ashes too. Maybe not in a bucket. Maybe in your chest. A memory you hoped no one would ask about. A word you never said again. A version of you that burned before anyone saw it. If so, you're not alone. Tonight, someone left their story in the bottom of a bucket. And you carried it. Not to judge. Not to read. Just to make sure it reached the river. Without anyone else ever knowing. That's what we do. That's what you do. You carry what others can't bear to hold even in silence. Even when it burns. It starts as a whisper. Not from the gutters. Not from the drains. From the sky. A single drop, cold on the back of your hand. Then another. And another. You pause at the edge of the alley. Glance up. The clouds don't roar. They don't crack. They simply let go. Like the city decided to sigh. Thomas doesn't flinch. He just pulls his collar a little higher and keeps walking. It won't last, he says. But you know that's not true. Not tonight. The rain is patient, persistent. Like everything you've carried. By the time you reach the final street, your coat is damp through. The bucket in your hand rings slightly when the rain hits it, a soft, metallic rhythm, not unpleasant. You empty the last pail behind a tenement, where no one ever leaves the light on. The lid is already open. It fills slightly with rainwater as you work. Dilutes what was never meant to be seen. You wipe the rim with a soaked cloth. It does nothing. But you do it anyway. Thomas waits for you at the edge of the gate, water dripping from his hat. You nod. He nods. And you both start back toward the yard. The rain deepens. The kind that seeps. The kind that doesn't splash, only soaks. Your gloves squish faintly. Your boots are heavier than ever. But still, you walk. Past the bakery that didn't open today. Past the window that stayed closed. Past the alley where the man once waited in the fog. All of it feels quieter now. Not because it's cleaner, but because it's been witnessed. You reach the yard. The shed is dry inside, but barely. The roof leaks in the left corner. It always has. Thomas hangs his coat on the hook. You do the same. Steam rises off the fabric. You both sit, side by side. No words for a while. Just the tap of rain on wood. The slow exhale of two bodies that did enough. Eventually, Thomas breaks the silence. Was a bad shift, he says. You nod, but you were steady. You look over. He means it. You feel it. Not pride, not triumph, just a kind of earned quiet. Like a blanket placed gently across your shoulders. You unlatch the gloves, fingers red underneath. You stretch your hands, feel the ache between the knuckles. You'll sleep well, he adds. You smile? Will I? He shrugs. As well as we're allowed. You watch the rain fall past the doorway. Each drop catches light for a second, then vanishes. You think about all the things you poured tonight. The waste, the ash, the stories. You carried them. Every single one. In silence. Without thanks. Without pause. Now you sit. Not dry, not clean, but still. Here. And somehow, that's enough. Still listening. Then let this last sound carry you. Rain, soft, even, unapologetic. The kind of rain that doesn't pretend to fix anything. Only reminds you that even the sky needs to let go sometimes. And so do you. So rest now. You've walked far enough. And no one can take this night from you. Not even the city. You find them one night, in the back of the shed, wrapped in oilcloth, folded neatly beside a stack of vinegar rags that haven't been used in months. Thomas isn't watching. He's busy washing his hands in a tin basin by the wall. You open the bundle gently. Inside an old pair of gloves. Cracked leather. Stiff fingers. A burn along one wrist. A single stitch along the thumb. Hand sewn with blue thread. Not yours. You lift them and turn them over in your palms. They don't fit. Of course they don't. But somehow, they still carry weight. Thomas glances over. Sees what you're holding. Doesn't flinch. They were Eli's, he says. You pause. Your first partner. He nods once. Did he leave them behind? No, Thomas says quietly. He took them off the night before he drowned. Said his hands needed to feel the world one more time. You don't know what to say. You place the gloves back in the cloth. Fold it slowly. Put it right where you found it. You've never seen Thomas cry, but you think, tonight might have been close. You're walking a new route, one Thomas hasn't taken in a while. He doesn't say why. You follow through narrow lanes until you reach a red brick house with a broken front step and ivy choking the chimney. Thomas stops, stares at the door. You wait. After a long pause, he speaks, voice low. My wife lived here, before the coughing took her. You glance at him, unsure. I thought she'd hate the job, thought she'd turn away when I came home. He smiles, faintly, but she never did. Kept the window open, always. Left bread on the counter. Never said a word about the smell. You ask, gently, why haven't you come back? He doesn't look at you. Because I still think I'll see her if I do. You both stand quietly, listening to the wind rattle the ivy. Then he turns and walks away. And you follow, because some places only exist for the people who are gone. The bucket slipped. That's how it began. A slick patch of ice, a missed step, a pail that tipped too far forward, covering his coat, his boots, and half the alley. He stood there, alone, holding the handle of an empty vessel, watching steam rise from his shame. You weren't there. It was years before your first shift. Thomas doesn't talk about that night unless the fog is thick enough to hide his eyes. But one evening, as you both wait out a storm under a tin awning, he says it. I almost walked away. You look up. I threw the gloves in the drain. Told myself I'd go home and never pick them up again. You wait. But then a door opened. A boy stepped out, held up a dry pair. Didn't say a word, just handed them to me. He shrugs. So I kept going. You nod. Not because you know how he felt, but because you know, sometimes, one small kindness is all it takes to stay. Sometimes, after long nights, when the buckets are empty and the sky begins to pale, Thomas hums. Just a few bars, the same tune, over and over. One night, you ask, what is that? He doesn't answer at first. Then, it's a song my mother used to sing, before the factory took her voice. You wait, never knew the words, just the tune. He hums again. You listen, and you realize this is how people keep their pasts alive. Not with books, not with speeches, but with small things. A folded glove, a cracked bowl, a song that never finishes. Thomas never sings the final note. He always stops one bar too soon, as if some things don't want to be remembered completely, only carried. It's your last question. You don't plan it. It just slips out. As you finish your shift one morning, wiping your hands with vinegar and watching the city yawn into daylight, you turn to him. Why did you stay? Thomas doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. He thinks, then answers, because someone had to. You wait for more. There are jobs that people forget, he says, but they don't stop needing them. He looks at you. And I figured if I could carry what others threw away, maybe it'd be enough. You nod, and in the quiet that follows, you realize he didn't stay because of duty. He stayed because leaving would have made him disappear. And Thomas was never meant to vanish. Not really. Not while someone still needed him. You made it through buckets and fog, through silence and steam, through hands that cracked and boots that never quite dried. You walked every alley, heard every whisper, poured what others left behind, not just the waste, but the weight of pretending it wasn't there. And now you get to sit, right here, right now, with me. Let's not tell another story tonight. Let's stay quiet and just think about what we carried. There's a reason no one thanked you. And it's not because you weren't needed. It's because you weren't supposed to exist. This job, this invisible work, it only mattered if no one noticed it was done. You weren't part of the story. You were the space that made the story possible. The silence behind the song, the sweep between footsteps. The reason a city woke up without drowning. That's what makes it so heavy. Not the waste, but the erasure. Every night, you walk through a world that never named you. No title, no uniform, no record in the books. And yet you touched every block, every pipe, every locked door. They never remembered your face, but you remembered theirs. You saw them in their windows, heard them behind their shutters, carried the things they couldn't admit they made. And still, you didn't flinch. Thomas knew this too. He never said much, But he walked beside you like someone who had stopped needing recognition and had started finding meaning in rhythm, in breath, in showing up. He taught you how to listen without ears, how to pour without judgment, how to stand without applause, and most importantly, how to disappear without bitterness. Because that's what this job asks of you. Not just strength, but grace. You learned a lot, didn't you? Not just how to lift, not just how to carry, but how to feel without breaking. You learned that a warm bucket means someone was just there, that a curtain that twitches might be a thank you in disguise, that a girl at a window holding a candle can make you feel more human than all the clean streets in the world. You learned to hear the city's heartbeat even when it came from a drain, or a whisper, or a privy that no longer smelled like waste, but like a story burned to ash. You learned that silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it means trust. Sometimes it means I know you'll come back. So now that it's quiet, now that you've sat down, now that your gloves are off and the rain has stopped, let's breathe. Together. In, soft. Out, softer. Nothing left to pour tonight. Nothing to carry. Only a body that has done enough. Only a mind that stayed steady. Only a heart that didn't shut down, even when no one called your name. Can I tell you something gentle? There are people like you, even now. Not with buckets, not with lanterns, but with tired eyes and steady hands. People who clean the mess without complaint. Who pick up what others won't touch. Who stay behind when everyone else moves on. You've met them. You might even be one of them. And I want you to know I see you, even if no one else does. Let the fog settle. Let the lantern dim. Let the steam rise from the stones one last time. You've done your shift. And now, you rest. Not because it's over, but because you kept going. That matters more than you think. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts soften. Let the images fade the cobblestones, the gloves, the shadows that never spoke. They're all behind you now. What's ahead is sleep. Sleep that smells faintly of vinegar and coal. Sleep that hums like a street lamp in mist. Sleep that says, you are safe, you are seen, you are here, and that is enough. I'll stay a little longer, if you like, just in case the city still whispers. But you can let go now. Close your eyes. The bucket is empty. The street is quiet. And somewhere in the dark, a girl in a window still holds her candle just for you. Good night. He listened. Better than anyone I'd ever met. There was a shift, Thomas says. When a pail handle snapped and spilled halfway across a brick floor, Thomas panicked, started muttering curses, apologies, shame spiraling up his throat like bile. And Finn, he stepped forward, cleaned it all, slowly, carefully, then handed Thomas a cloth. No sigh, no frown, no words, just a look that said, it's done, let's go. You walk past a bakery. The smell of old dough lingers like nostalgia. Thomas continues, they say Finn didn't speak because words didn't help. He'd seen too many things that couldn't be fixed by talking. You ask, did he ever smile? Thomas nods. Once. I told a joke about a bucket with a hole in it. Didn't land well, but I caught him smirking when he thought I wasn't looking. You grin, that counts. There was a rule with Finn, apparently. If you dropped something, he picked it up. If you fell behind, he slowed. If you cried because yes, even strong men broke down sometimes, he stood nearby. Not touching, not staring, just being there. Like an anchor made of silence. Where is he now, you ask? Thomas breathes out slowly. It fogs in the cold. Last I saw him, he took his gloves off and set them on the gatepost. Walked away down the lane. Never came back. No explanation, no note, just silence, beginning to end. And in that silence, somehow, you understand. Later, as you hang your gloves to dry, you realize you've started talking less too. Not because you're becoming like Finn, but because you've learned that not everything needs to be said to be understood. That sometimes, the way you hand someone a bucket can speak louder than any comfort. Still listening. Then maybe you've met someone like Finn, not quiet from fear, not silent from distance, but from knowing that holding space is its own kind of love. If so, maybe you carry that quiet with you, too. Not to hide, not to retreat, But to remind others, you don't have to say a word to make someone feel safe. You didn't mean to find it. It was tucked inside the pocket of Thomas's coat, the one he never wore unless the night turned to ice. You'd grabbed it to hang by the fire. The sleeves were stiff. The lining still held a hint of ash and soap. And then it slipped out, a folded scrap of yellowed paper, creased from years of movement, but still whole. Thomas saw you freeze. He looked at the paper in your hand, then simply said, "Go ahead." You unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was small, tight, slanted like it didn't want to take up too much space. It read, "Annie, it rained again tonight. The kind that doesn't soak you fast, just lets the cold find its way through the seams." The buckets were full. That means people are alive. Eating, moving, still needing. I worked with a boy this week. New hands, good heart. Doesn't flinch at the bad parts. That's rare. I passed the window today. Yours. Still has the lace curtain. Still leans to the left. I didn't look in. Didn't need to. I know what's not there. But I left my gloves on the rail for a second. Just so you'd know I passed by. I'll be back tomorrow. Same route, same street, same quiet. That's the closest thing to staying that I can manage now. Yours, always T. You didn't realize you were holding your breath. Thomas stood beside you, eyes on the floor. You refolded it, carefully, gently. Placed it back into his pocket. Didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. But later, as you walked, you asked not about the letter, but about her. "Annie," he nodded. "Your wife?" "Yes." "Did she ever see the letter?" He shook his head. "She died before I wrote it." You kept walking, past doors that never opened, past streets that no one named, past a city that forgot how to care for those who carried its silence. And yet somewhere in the mist, you felt a thread, a man still writing to a window that hadn't looked back in years. That night, Thomas worked quieter than usual. Not slow, not tired, just deeper inside himself. At one point, he stopped beside the gate of a garden. You saw him slip his glove off and place it gently on the iron rail. He didn't stay long. Just a second. Just long enough for someone who wasn't there to maybe still notice. Then he put it back on and walked on, still listening. Then maybe you know what that letter was really for. Not to be read, not to be sent, but to be kept warm, close to the chest, folded over and over until the crease became memory. Some words aren't meant for mail. They're meant for surviving. And tonight, you saw the kind of love that doesn't need an answer to stay true. You and Thomas were waiting out a drizzle in the yard, sipping tea that tasted like rain. The kind of quiet where neither of you needed to talk. Then Thomas said, "You ever hear about Eli Bell?" You shook your head. Thomas looked into the steam from his cup. He was the cleanest pourer I ever saw. Could empty a pail without a splash, even in wind. You smiled. "Sounds like a legend." "He was," Thomas said, "until he wasn't." Eli Bell was reliable, never late, never loud, never lost a step, even on the frost-slick lanes of Dockside. 3 years I worked with him, Thomas said. Not once did he grumble. Didn't even sigh. You imagined a man made of routine, of muscle memory, of quiet purpose. Then one night, Thomas said, it happened. Just a normal night. 8 stops in, steam rising from privy lids, lantern glow soft and yellow. They turned down a narrow street near the tannery. Eli lifted the bucket, same as always, tipped it forward, paused, and didn't move. Thomas thought maybe the handle burned his hand, or the weight shifted wrong. He stepped closer. Need help? No answer. Eli stood, arms extended, bucket tilted, mid-pour. But no waste fell. The liquid trembled at the lip so close to tipping over. And Eli just stared into it. Not like he was stuck, like he was listening to something inside the bucket that no one else could hear. Thomas tried again. Eli, still nothing. Then, slowly, Eli set the bucket down, lid still off, stink curling into the night. He wiped his hands on his trousers, took off his gloves, folded them, laid them on the step beside the door, then turned and walked away. No word, no look back, just one long walk into fog. Thomas didn't follow, didn't call out. He finished the pour himself, put the lid back, marked the wall, then kept walking. He never came back, Thomas said. Never you asked. Thomas shook his head. His house was empty, his bed made, his boots still by the fire. No one looked for him. Thomas sipped his tea. We all did, in our own way. But no one found him. No. Some say he broke. Others say he finally saw something in the bottom of the pail he couldn't carry anymore. Not a smell, not a sight, a memory, maybe, or a truth. Something that made the wait different. Thomas looked at you then. Every night, we walk right to the edge of silence. Eli stepped over. You didn't know what to say, so you didn't say anything. Later that shift, you were pouring behind a butcher's. The smell was strong, even through the rain. You found your hands pausing, just for a second mid-pour, right where Eli once stood. You looked into the bucket, saw only waste, but you wondered, what had he seen? Still here, still listening. Then maybe you understand? It's not always the weight of the bucket that breaks a person. It's the moment they finally stop pretending it's just a job. Sometimes, the quiet becomes too loud. Sometimes, you stare into what others leave behind, and you see yourself. And sometimes, you set the bucket down and walk away. If that ever happens to you, it's okay. Just leave your gloves folded, so someone like Thomas knows you left with dignity. It started on a Tuesday, cold but dry. One of those nights where the city felt unusually light. No shouting, no creaking gates, just soft wheels rolling over stone. You and Thomas had just finished the second stop when he said, "We've got company." You turned. A boy, 10, maybe 12, wearing a cap too big and boots too thin. He wasn't hiding, wasn't asking anything, just following, at a distance, far enough not to intrude, close enough not to disappear. You paused, looked at Thomas. He shrugged. Leave him. For 3 nights, he did the same, always behind, never closer than the glow of your lantern, never farther than your shadow. He never spoke, didn't flinch at the smell, didn't stare at the pails, didn't try to help, just watched, listened, walked. On the 4th night, you stopped mid-route, turned around. He stopped too. You raised a hand. You all right? He didn't answer, just stared, not blankly, not sadly, just with something you couldn't name. Then he took a step back, turned, and ran. Thomas said nothing for the rest of the shift. But before dawn, as you were rinsing the buckets, he said quietly, "That was me, once." You looked at him. He nodded. Not literally, but the feeling. I knew it. Knew what? What it means to watch the worst job in the city, and still think maybe that's where I belong. You never saw the boy again, not for weeks, until one night near the edge of the docks, you returned to the cart and froze. On top of the covered load, balanced perfectly between pails of human waste, was a bundle of flowers. Wild ones, fresh, tied with string, purple, white, yellow. A small thing, but bright in a place that was never meant for beauty. You looked around. No one. Not a footstep, not a giggle. Just steam and quiet. Thomas stood beside you and said only he understood. You carried the cart to the river. Didn't touch the flowers. Didn't move them. Just let them ride. All the way to the edge of forgetting. Still here. Then maybe you know what it means to see something dirty and offer it grace anyway. To watch from the shadows and still leave something beautiful behind. We never knew who the boy was. Never asked. Because some names don't matter. Only the gift. And the quiet. And the strange tenderness of a flower placed on a pile of waste, as if to say, I see what you carry, and I won't look away. There's always one house that doesn't match the map, one address that stays on the route, but never leaves anything out. You passed number 12 Finch Row for the 6th week in a row. Still no bucket, still no lid, still no smell, just a green door, a brass number, and curtains that never flutter. You paused. Thomas didn't. You caught up. Why do we keep checking it? He didn't look at you. Because it's on the list. But it's never. I know. 3 more shifts. 3 more passes. Nothing. No sign of life. No requests. No complaints. Then one night, you spoke. I think no one lives there. Thomas stopped. That's what I thought too. Once. He stared at the windows. They used to. A family. 2 girls. Quiet. Never late. Always tied the lid with twine. You looked again. It didn't look abandoned. No broken windows. No mail piling up. No smell of rot. Just stillness. And that made it worse. Did they move, you asked? Thomas shook his head. They disappeared. One winter, long before you joined, the neighbors started complaining of a smell. Not sewage, not mold, just wrong. Sharp, like rust, or vinegar left too long. Thomas went to check. Knocked. No answer. He checked again the next week. Still no bucket. Still no sound. So he asked the landlord. The man had a key. Together, they went inside. What Thomas found wasn't mess. It wasn't death either. It was absence. No furniture, no firewood, no clothes. Only 2 cups on the kitchen shelf, both clean. And a chair, facing the wall, as if someone had been sitting there, waiting for the house to stop being a house. The landlord turned pale. I didn't know they'd gone. Thomas didn't answer. He just checked the privy. It was spotless, empty, bone dry, as if it had never been used. After that, the route kept number 12, out of habit, out of superstition, because no one wanted to ask the real question, where did they go? Sometimes, people vanish in a city like London. Sometimes they're erased. By poverty, by shame, by paperwork that never got signed. But other times, they vanish because they were never truly there to begin with. Just names on a list, just twine on a lid, just warmth that faded from the stone too quietly. You pass number 12 again. Still no bucket. But tonight, the curtains shift just a little, and you wonder, still here. Then maybe you've known a place like that. A door that never opens, a name no one says out loud, a silence that feels too deliberate to be accidental. And maybe, in your own life, you've left a space empty for someone who never came back. If so, know this. Even if the bucket was never filled, someone remembered to keep checking. Even now, even tonight, even after all this time, Thomas always carried a second pair, folded, wrapped in cloth, not for backup, not for weather. He never used them, but he brought them. Every night, you noticed the shape of them once tucked into his coat lining, stiff, faded, stitched with red thread along the knuckle. What's that, you asked? He glanced at them. Didn't answer. Not that night. It wasn't until weeks later, after a hard shift, your gloves soaked through, your fingers blistered and pink, that he finally handed them to you. Just for tonight, he said. You unfolded them. They were heavier than they looked. Broken in, worn smooth in the thumb and fingertips. They smelled like ash, and vinegar, and something older. You slipped them on, and felt something strange. Like dozens of hands had already shaped them, like they remembered how to move before you even did. Afterward, when the shift ended, you offered to give them back. Thomas shook his head. Not to me, he said. To the next? You frowned. Next what? He looked you in the eyes. Next one who stays. That's when he told you. The gloves weren't his. They'd belonged to a man named Coates, who got them from a man named Bram, who never spoke, but hummed low when he worked. Each man who wore them passed them on, not when they quit, not when they died, but when they saw someone worth handing them to. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a gesture, a trust. You don't keep them forever, Thomas said. They don't belong to anyone. They belong to the work. You looked down at your hands. The gloves fit perfectly, and you suddenly realized you didn't want to wear them forever. You wanted to earn the right to give them away. There were tiny markings inside, scratches, initials, dates, one etched with something that looked like a nail. A lineage no one spoke aloud, but everyone knew was real. Still listening. Then maybe you've held something like that. Not expensive, not beautiful, but weighty with use, soft with memory, full of all the hands that held it before you. And maybe you didn't want to keep it. Maybe you just wanted to be the kind of person who could pass it on. Because that's what legacy looks like in silence. Not trophies, not plaques, just gloves, warm, stitched, and waiting for the next set of hands. It was a clear night, unusually still. You could hear your own breath between footsteps. The sort of night where everything felt accounted for, until it wasn't. You and Thomas were mid-route, 6 stops in, everything by the book, buckets where they should be, lids tied, pours clean. Then you turned the corner behind number 48, and the bucket was gone. You blinked, checked the corner, the wall, the gate. Thomas looked twice, then 3 times. No one ever forgets this one, he murmured. You checked the record. Yes, they always left it. Same spot, same lid, every third night. But tonight, nothing. You knocked on the door? No answer. You asked the neighbor. They shrugged, said they hadn't seen anyone go in or out. You looked for signs. A trail? A puddle? A scuff? Nothing. Not even a shadow. You walked on, but the silence hung differently now, like a word unsaid, stuck in your teeth. The rest of the shift moved slower, every lid heavier, every pour more careful. You kept thinking, who takes a full bucket, and why? You returned to the yard near dawn, wrote the report, left the note. Thomas didn't speak. He just stared at the cart a long time before finally covering it. The next day, just before sunset, a man came, middle-aged, tidy coat, eyes red, like he hadn't slept. He walked to the yard's edge, waited, didn't knock, didn't call out, just stood there, holding something wrapped in canvas. You stepped out first. He didn't flinch, didn't introduce himself, just held the bundle out to you, and said I needed one reason not to do it. You didn't understand. You opened the cloth. Inside, the missing bucket, cleaned, polished, still warm to the touch, not with waste. With something else. Hope, maybe, grief, or both. Thomas came out, saw the man. They looked at each other for a long time. Then the man nodded once, and left. You never saw him again? Later, you asked, what do you think he meant? Thomas stared at the bucket. I think he was ready to go. You hesitated, too. Thomas nodded, but he saw us. That night. Saw us. Thomas's voice was quiet. Saw someone carrying what he thought he had to carry alone. Sometimes, the bucket isn't filled with waste. Sometimes, it's filled with something people can't name. Pain, loneliness, shame. And sometimes, just seeing someone else carry anything quietly, gently, is enough to make you hold on one more night. Still here, then maybe you felt like that man. Maybe you've stood in a doorway with something heavy in your hands, hoping for one small reason to not give up. And maybe you didn't need someone to speak, just someone to walk by, just someone to carry a bucket, just someone to say without saying it, you are not the only one holding this. You'd heard whispers. Thomas never liked the word rival, but he used it anyway. There's another team. He said one night, same hours, different district, never late. You asked, you know them. He shook his head. I've seen them. They worked in the East Quarter, the poorer streets, where lamps burned out faster and alleyways ran deeper than the map said. You never crossed paths. Until the fog got thick one Thursday. You and Thomas were ahead of schedule. A few missed stops. No spills. Your boots were quiet from the cold. Then Thomas stopped mid-step. You followed his gaze. And there they were. 4 figures. No lantern, no sound. Just silhouettes, standing still at the edge of the mist. Each one held a bucket. Their coats were dark, identical, too clean for the route they worked. They didn't move, didn't wave, didn't blink. You raised your hand. One figure nodded barely, then turned. The rest followed. They vanished between 2 shuttered buildings. Gone, like they were never there. You stood in silence. Thomas muttered, they always worked together, always 4. You waited. No one spoken to them in years, not even the record keepers. How? They bring the buckets. The work's done. That's all anyone needs. That night, you asked more questions. Do they talk to each other? Not in front of anyone. Do they live here? No one's sure. One rumor said they were brothers. Another said they were orphans raised by the old sewer keeper in the East End. Some swore they were former soldiers. Some whispered they were ghosts. Thomas said nothing to that. But you noticed. He never walked too close to their zone again. Weeks passed. You never saw them again? But sometimes, on quiet nights, when your shift took you near the East Quarter, you'd spot 4 sets of footprints in the mud all the same distance apart, all headed in the same direction, always forward. Still here? Then let me tell you this. Not everyone doing the same work walks the same way. Some carry with chatter, some with silence, and some with something heavier. Duty, memory, or something older than both. The rival route wasn't about competition. It was about knowing we are not the only ones walking this path. And that's both comforting and terrifying. You were scrubbing your boots behind the shed when the knock came. Soft. 3 taps. Not urgent. Not hesitant. Thomas was already halfway to the door before you looked up. When he opened it, the man stood with both hands folded in front of him. Coat pressed, collar stiff, boots polished. He didn't smell like the root, didn't look like the job, but his eyes knew exactly where they were. Thomas stared for a moment, then said, "You came." The man nodded. "Only for tonight." You didn't speak, just watched as Thomas stepped back and let him in. No name, no explanation, just a motion toward the spare gloves. The man didn't take them. He pulled a pair from his coat pocket, wrapped in cloth. Worn at the thumbs. You walked with him that night. Not Thomas. Just you and this stranger who wasn't quite a stranger. He knew every turn, every shortcut. Where to stand. Where the stone curved. Where the handle splintered. He didn't flinch. Didn't sigh. Just worked. Like he'd never left. Only once did he pause. "Stop, number 12. You opened the gate." He stared at the bucket, then kneeled beside it. Not to pour, to place his hand on the lid. Gently, like it was something sacred. Then he lifted, poured, wiped, closed, and stood still. "You waited," he said. "This was my brother's last stop." Back at the cart, he finally spoke again. "I left this city 10 years ago. Bought land in Kent. Built a life without the smell." You nodded. He smiled, faintly. "Thought I'd forgotten how to do this." "But you didn't." You said, "No." Then, softer, "I just needed to finish what he started." You learned later, his brother had been Thomas's first partner. Died mid-road. Heart gave out behind a bakery. The man never made it back to finish the last pour. So tonight, his brother did it for him. At the end of the shift, the man cleaned his gloves, folded them, left them on the post by the yard gate. Thomas stood beside you as he walked away. "He always said he'd never come back." Thomas whispered. You said, "Why did he?" Thomas looked down. "Because love makes liars of us all." Still here. Then maybe you've walked away from something you thought you'd buried. Maybe you've tried to stay clean, to stay distant, to build a life where the smell doesn't reach you. But sometimes, you come back, not to start over, not to suffer, just to finish one last thing for someone who couldn't. And in doing so, you clean more than a bucket. You clean memory, gently, quietly, completely. You made it, through buckets and fog, through silence and steam, through hands that cracked and boots that never quite dried. You walked every alley, heard every whisper, poured what others left behind, not just the waste, but the weight of pretending it wasn't there. And now, you get to sit, right here, right now, with me. Let's not tell another story tonight. Let's stay quiet, and just think about what we carried. There's a reason no one thanked you. And it's not because you weren't needed. It's because you weren't supposed to exist. This job, this invisible work, it only mattered if no one noticed it was done. You weren't part of the story. You were the space that made the story possible. The silence behind the song, the sweep between footsteps, the reason a city woke up without drowning. That's what makes it so heavy. Not the waste, but the erasure. Every night, you walked through a world that never named you. No title, no uniform, no record in the books. And yet you touched every block, every pipe, every locked door. They never remembered your face, but you remembered theirs. You saw them in their windows, heard them behind their shutters, carried the things they couldn't admit they made. And still, you didn't flinch. Thomas knew this too. He never said much, but he walked beside you like someone who had stopped needing recognition and had started finding meaning in rhythm, in breath, in showing up. He taught you how to listen without ears, how to pour without judgment, how to stand without applause, and most importantly, how to disappear without bitterness. Because that's what this job asks of you. Not just strength, but grace. You learned a lot, didn't you? Not just how to lift, not just how to carry, but how to feel without breaking. You learned that a warm bucket means someone was just there, that a curtain that twitches might be a thank you in disguise, that a girl at a window, holding a candle, can make you feel more human than all the clean streets in the world. You learned to hear the city's heartbeat, even when it came from a drain, or a whisper, or a privy that no longer smelled like waste, but like a story burned to ash. You learned that silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it means trust. Sometimes it means I know you'll come back. So now that it's quiet, now that you've sat down, now that your gloves are off and the rain has stopped, let's breathe. Together. In, soft. Out, softer. Nothing left to pour tonight. Nothing to carry. Only a body that has done enough. Only a mind that stayed steady. Only a heart that didn't shut down, even when no one called your name. Can I tell you something gentle? There are people like you, even now. Not with buckets, not with lanterns, but with tired eyes and steady hands. People who clean the mess without complaint. Who pick up what others won't touch. Who stay behind when everyone else moves on. You've met them. You might even be one of them. And I want you to know I see you, even if no one else does. Let the fog settle. Let the lantern dim. Let the steam rise from the stones one last time. You've done your shift. And now, you rest. Not because it's over, but because you kept going. That matters more than you think. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts soften. Let the images fade the cobblestones. The gloves, the shadows that never spoke. They're all behind you now. What's ahead is sleep. Sleep that smells faintly of vinegar and coal. Sleep that hums like a street lamp in mist. Sleep that says, you are safe. You are seen. You are here. And that is enough. I'll stay a little longer, if you like, just in case the city still whispers. But you can let go now. Close your eyes. The bucket is empty. The street is quiet. And somewhere in the dark, a girl in a window still holds her candle just for you. Good night.